Man,
Okay.
so you're keeping very busy, Phil, in this this pandemic.
It's not so bad. Not so bad.
Yeah.
I'm home. I'm home. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So, tell us a little bit about what this time has been like for you. The pandemic hit in March, which is when you had your series, which you've been doing now for how many years? For edition
47th and 48th. I don't know. I can't take 73 away from this year and see what you get.
Yeah. Edition of the series with no fancy name.
It became that name about 20 years into the series or something like that. So.
It doesn't look like everything was canceled. So the pandemic, the real shutdown must have hit right as you were starting.
We can only do one concert. Jens Brunn from Berlin. Jens got in just before the pandemic, and then he got out again, which was also interesting. He got a flight back. Everything else was canceled or postponed. Mm-hmm. And there's supposed to be something happening in December, but probably doesn't make any sense. We'd have to do it by Zoom anyway, so probably they'll be postponed until next March, and we'll have a bigger series.
So has this ever happened before? And since 1973, have you ever had issues where you've to cancel this? No.
They've always gone on. They've always been live. We've been recording since '79, and so we have all these tapes. The Lincoln Center, New York Public Library, is taking the EI archive, and will eventually take my archive. And it's just been going very, very slowly because we have all of these tapes and boxes ready to go to them, and they've been sitting there for a year now. And,
So I know that Jim Staley and some other people that I'm close with in New York City for many, many years were very inspired by you and the work that you were doing at your loft, putting on a concert series in the space that you also lived and worked inside of. I've always wondered whether there was a precedent for you. Were there people in New York or other parts of the world that inspired you to start hosting a concert series in your loft?
It partly came about because of the kitchen, the original kitchen at the Mercer Art Center, which was the Fasokas space. And they asked we shot him when he was 19 and I was 38, and my son was just born, so we're all 19 years apart, to curate a series of music events. And so that was actually my first concert without film. I think there were 2 concerts there. And then we were set to do a third concert, and I had gone out of town on my motorcycle somewhere and came back the night before. And Herman Itch had done a performance that covered the raw masonite floor with blood, and the stench was really unbelievable. And so we decided to move the concert to my loft and just have we got a bus, a Volkswagen bus it's only a 5-minute walk anyway. But bring people around, so. And so that was the first concert that actually occurred here that was a public concert. And so I thought it was better if I did what I thought that artists should do. They should produce other artists. And so that I would make a production and invite people to come and play their music. So that first series in '73 was 7 composers, of which Reese was one. So Charlemagne was one, and Joel Chatterby, and I just have to go back and look at the list myself. The list of composers, by the way, is complete and on the website. So you can see all the composers that we know of, because in the early days we were sending notices by postcards, and they were just typed postcards, and we just reproduced that typing. And there was no computer, of course. So there's no record of those concerts except that postcard. So if we've lost postcards, we don't know who performed.
Were you at the time interested in jazz? Were you going to this loft jazz concerts?
I didn't go to the loft jazz stuff. When I first came to New York, because I was a jazz fan, I was going to a lot of clubs. I mean, in fact, for months, I mostly went to jazz clubs.
Mm.
So I was up most of the night and going to clubs.
Yeah.
And then I began to photograph a couple of years later. And then I started taking, shots of jazz people.
You started as a visual artist, but
I started doing photography in '60, yeah.
And then started making films.
'61, I was photographing jazz people, and until about '64. And then actually I had a job working for United Artists. I shot the Ellington, Migginson, Roach session. And I met the guy who was the art director who'd been there shooting for and the cover photograph is from Frank Galna, that director.
Oh.
So, and he saw me, and so I was shooting, so he asked me to bring some stuff in, so I took stuff, and then he hired me for about a year to shoot. And I asked his very close friend, Martin Bao, who is part of the other story of Sunra, because he was the one who knew Sunra. He's from Chicago originally. He knew Sunra, and Sonny had asked him, said he wanted a film made, so he asked me if I would make a film, because I had just started making films in '65, and this was in '66. So I started the film with Sunra in '66. Martin was a interesting guy because he played tenor saxophone, and he was a photographer. He was actually ended up teaching at the College of Staten Island, or Staten Island Community College, for many years as an adjunct, and stayed many years after I even quit. He's about 90 or 91 now, I think. So.
Oh, wow.
So he was actually running a printing machine in a stationery store, which was doing a lot of the small printing. I was with a publishing house, Appleton Century Crofts, working on a extensive project with B.F. Skinner, the psychologist. And so he was the chief author of this series. And we needed to do some printing of a very special kind. And this shop had a machine which wasn't being used, but it had a Dahlgren printing system, which allowed us to print the material we were printing on, which couldn't be done with a normal press. And so
very cool.
And he was there working. So I walked in one day. I'll tell you the story anyway now. So I walked in one day, and here was this guy it was a hot summer day, his T-shirt, this very skinny guy, and running a press.
Yeah.
And and we went to another press in the same, 10 feet away, something like that, with a guy that I was working with who was going to run the press. And he was very skeptical of us, of course, so sneering, But on his shelf was an Nikon F. So as I walked past him, I said, "Oh, you're a photographer, huh?" And then I walked on. And the next time I came, there was a tenor saxophone case sitting on the floor. So I said, "Oh, you play tenor, huh?" I took care of that. So it turned out that photography was somehow a very natural thing for me, both the imaging part of it, but also the technical part of it. So I was a very good printer, as well as taking a lot of photographs. I mean, for guys who take a lot of photographs, I didn't take so many photographs, but on the other hand, I took enough. Yeah. And it all fit very naturally. And then when I started doing the jazz people, that was sort of an interesting offshoot from it. And then I began going with somebody who was in a theater group, the Open Theater, and I began to photograph them quite a bit too. So that was another sort of offshoot of it. And eventually I thought, well, it would be interesting if I tried shooting some film, since it was so allied in terms of composition and things like that. So I did. So I started working with Elaine Summers, who was a filmmaker, choreographer, in 1965. And she had just done a really big thing at the Judson Dance Theater, or Judson Memorial Church, which I missed by 2 months or something like that. So I didn't see that. And people in the group there were like Phil Corner and Malcolm Goldstein making music, and a lot of dancers. And so I began to hang out at Judson for about 5 years and worked with a lot of different dancers and stuff. I worked with Elaine pretty closely for about a year, and then I began to shoot off into other things, other dancers, and doing other stuff, and doing like the Sunra film, etc.
So the Sunra film then had to be pretty early on in your filmmaking
very early on, yeah.
life. Yeah.
Yeah, well, like a year after I started, or I wasn't so together. Good God, a film.
Yeah, this is what I found in the collection. There was a box that was in the Sunra collection at ESS.
You have a copy of the film?
Yes.
That's amazing. I didn't think there were any more than two. I have two. That film was one of the things, as I worked, I shot many times sections of that film. And what's on that film are the last two sections only that I shot. And the last one was shot on a stock which is used to make titles. It's a high contrast black and white stock. It only comes as double perf, and it's very high contrast, and that's the reason that all of that's the same. And the last 2/3 of the film are shot in one night with that stock, and it's shot into directly into a light bulb. I had a light bulb and a reflector, sort of big reflector, which had crumpled aluminum foil in it. And so, and I was shooting directly into the light, so that almost all the stuff is silhouetted against the light. So you see a fingertip. I was just shooting fingertips doing that.
Yeah.
So that's what all that is, and it's virtually it's like 80% of the film that I shot that night is in that film.
Is in the film. Oh wow.
It's
so what
complete, and I just cut out stuff and maybe superimposed. In fact, I was superimposing in the camera, so I was backing the film up and shooting it again. So
right.
All the supers that you see in the film are actually in camera supers, not live supers. So.
Amazing. So do you recognize any of this? I mean, I'm not sure whether you can see it or not, but like any of this handwriting on here?
Yes, Shadow World is not my film, so that's something. Did you look at that film?
Well, yes, I made a transfer, and this is your film. It's missing the very beginning. Yeah, it's just kind of.
Yeah, that's it. It looks like that's
the
it.
one.
Yeah, so
Yep, but that's it. I made a transfer just to sort of like a demo transfer using a transfer machine at the School of the Art Institute where I teach, just to make sure. And at first I didn't realize, I didn't put two and two together, so I thought I had found something that the world had never seen before. World of film. But I was really blown away to realize it was your film, and excited to talk to you about it. So that's so cool. It was all shot in one night. What was the situation? Where was it shot, and what was the context that it was being shot within?
It was shot in the apartment on 2nd Avenue that Sonny and the people lived in. So then just in the living room. There was none of it is, there's no music. And they weren't playing. They were sitting there doing something in front of my camera. So it's not at all a documentation of a performance.
Of a performance, yeah.
And neither is the stuff which is the beginning of the film. That was shot actually on the roof of the building during the daytime, and then it was processed as negative. So it shows up as negative in the first half, and the second half is positive. So
Yeah.
Yeah, because
So it was
in a reversal film, which then I printed as negative,
right.
so it's saved reversed.
Right. Yeah. So where was his apartment? It was in the East Village, or you said Lower East Side? Is that?
It was somewhere very close to Anthology.
Oh, okay.
I don't remember the address at all. I don't know that it's ever was put down.
Who did he live there with? Was that like a community living situation, or was it?
Yeah, it was the people who
Yeah.
lived in the apartment sort of lived there. It was, I think Gilmore was there, Pat Patrick. I can't remember it because I knew all those guys, because I also took the portions of the film which I had just shot, and I showed it at Slugs behind the band.
Oh, cool.
Maybe a dozen times, something like that, because he was playing at Slugs all the time.
Right.
In those years, 66, 67.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I was constantly going there with a 60 millimeter projector, and Slugs was in a really, heavily infested drug addict area. That was a club that was really kind of amazing that it existed, because it was stark to go there. So I used to actually go to Harlem a lot when I was in the late 50s, early 60s, and go to Harlem clubs. So I would go to Count Basie's or Paradise, and especially a club at 155th Street and St. Nicholas Terrace, which was way out, and where Ram Ramirez was the organist playing. And then there's shots of Ben Webster playing there with Mel Lewis on drums and Major Holly on bass. So I was used to going to Harlem, but
but Slugs was a different scene.
Slugs was a heavy drug scene. That whole area was.
So your friend sort of made this suggestion. Were you hired by Sunra, or was this just your idea and you wanted to film them and you approached the band?
No, I just did it. Yeah. No, I was.
You just did it.
Definitely an amateur. So it was very easy to work with Sonny. He was very, very nice man. So
yeah,
and, they were very accommodating. I would normally shot things when they were actually performing, but then at the end I was doing stuff where they came and they milled around and I shot stuff. The stuff that's on the second part is shot with a 135 millimeter kill fit lens with extension tubes. So it's
wow.
It's also weird. It's a fairly long lens with extension tubes to get those close-ups and stuff. So.
Did you form a relationship? Did you continue to stay in touch with him at all after you were after this period?
We besides showing it at Slugs all the time, the material that was there, he did a Carnegie Hall concert, which I think George Schuster was the guy who did that. And so we showed the film on the back wall of Carnegie Hall, the finished film, actually, because it was in 69 and the film was finished in 68. So it was we showed the print that you have there, actually, which is 17 minutes.
So this reel, you didn't know that this copy existed. So this would have been.
What you have is the copy of the film, which Sunra had. Because I gave him a copy, and I never knew what happened to it after that, of course. So it's almost certain that that's the film, because there were no other prints. I think I made 3 prints.
Wow.
We had to make the prints because the film that I shot with, which would have been the natural thing to print on, was double perf, so it didn't have no track.
Right.
So we had to make it on a single perf film. And we ended up using the standard black and white release film, 7302, and we had it processed in a high contrast bath at Movie Lab. It was the only one in the country that we know of. And Movie Lab went out of business a few years later, and so we couldn't make another print.
Oh, wow.
So there's only 3 prints of the film.
Wow.
You have one, and it must be the one that Sunra
that had, yeah.
in his collection. So I wonder what happened to it, but I assume it just got shredded and. Is it very scratched up, or not?
A little bit. I can send you. I made a transfer of it, so I can send
me
the transfer. Yeah, what the transfer looks like. It was just done on this transfer machine that they have at the school, available for general use. So it's not like what you just had done, the 2K transfer that you were just describing. How did you get from an early film like this work that you did with Sunra to your films of people working, and that turning into a much more like long form kind of thinking? And then when did you start making audio tape pieces that then also like exude this shift into a deep involvement with time and length and repetition?
That's two different questions.
I know.
Well, as I said, I was working a lot around the Judson Dance Theater, which were most of the choreographers who were post-Cunningham people. And there was a lot of visual arts. I mean, people like Yvonne Rainer was doing stuff with Robert Morris. And so there were painters and filmmakers and that kind of thing performing there. So I started myself to do something, so that halfway through that, I made my first performance event with 16 millimeter film and slides and music. So the first music actually was that music from 1968. And it was done, actually, the first piece was an organ piece with the organ at Judson Church.
At Judson. Oh, very cool.
Yeah. So I sometime in the middle of 68, I had defined how I would make music and what I would make and how to do it. So everything was sort of all set in my mind. And that's the music that I made is that music.
Was that a conscious decision to sort of be able to focus on a particular set of ideas?
Sure.
And continue to investigate? Sure.
Hell yes.
How do you think about that? I mean,
the same thing pretty much with moving people working in films. I mean, there these 6 films which were done before 1970, of which Sunra was one. Everything is completely different. Those 6 films are incredibly different from each other. But then once I started doing the Moving People Working, which was in 73, what happened was that I had this group of people, two dancers and 2 tech people and myself. So there were 5 of us in this company, and we simply couldn't get any gigs. We couldn't get enough gigs, and it was very cumbersome because we would have to get a van and go places with all the 16 millimeter projectors and everything. So, and a screen. I made a portable screen with 13 9-foot long 2x2s, and they were all had screw holes and triangles to hold the screen up. You could mount the screen with a photographic paper in about half an hour. You could have a 36-foot wide screen, 9 feet high.
Yeah.
So 3 16 millimeter images, 3 12-foot wide 16 millimeter images, or 2 slides that were, because that's a different aspect ratio. And then there was live dance and music in those performances. So there were 4 different pieces altogether. And by the 4th piece, I think really got together. I mean, it was really a fantastic piece. We're still showing that now because I had
that's great.
All the cut film I transferred from those concerts in the late 60s, early 70s. We just did it at the Tate Modern 2 years ago. I had a film lab that I went to very early, and it was primarily the only film lab that I ever worked with. And from 1967 until 91 or to 89 was the last film, and they stopped doing film. And so, and the guy who was the chief guy, the timer, who decided what the film looked like, he looked at the negative and then made it, made the print. The color corrector is what we would call it now. Was about 80, and he was retiring. So the last film that he did was the film from Japan, the last film that I shot.
Of that series.
The 2 years after that, I shot in video, which was much less interesting looking stuff. But then I shot, for instance, I would shoot about 2.5 hours of film a year for the movement we were working, sometimes twice a year. But when I went to Sumatra to shoot the first video, and I shot 24 hours of video. It costs $10 per hour.
Yeah, right.
So $10 for 2 hours, actually. So the tapes were 2 hours long.
Right.
It was high 8 was the format. So
there is another video that I'm familiar with of yours of Arthur Russell performing, and I did have a question about whether there were other films or recordings that you made of musicians. I was thinking about the Sunra and the Arthur Russell, and wondering whether you had more.
One other with Max Newhouse.
Max Newhouse
caused me never to want to collaborate again. And it's one of the reasons that I started doing music, because I didn't want to find somebody that I could describe what I wanted and have to make the music. I just decided I better make my own music. So, so that's what happened.
What year was that you did that?
68.
Max Newhouse, 68. Yeah.
Well, that was 66 to 67, probably.
Okay.
It was an early one. I had footage of Max that I shot in his studio, and then I shot some other stuff in a printing plant, and I just combined the two things. And I turned all the material over to Dave Geary, who's another very close friend from 65. And I met Martin in 63, and Geary. And oddly enough, we're all Libras. We're all born in October, so. And I still work very, very closely with David. Yeah. So he edited that material with Max. So all of those things were sort of collaborations. Particularly the thing, as I said, when I shot the Sunra thing, it was not a documentation of a performance. It was something that I set up, and they did things that I wanted them to do. So it was their movement.
Right.
Again, I was recording movement again. So,
yeah, right.
And the same thing with Arthur, because I suggested to him that we do a collaboration where I shot video. And so what that was a setup shoot where he brought in some very new music that he was doing. And that music became what he was actually most known for, because it was the stuff that turned out to be the World of Echo record.
World of Echo, yeah.
And a good part of the World of Echo record is actually the soundtrack from that shoot. We made copies. Steve Kellum was a recording engineer, and we recorded a PCM digital on Betamax tape. The track of the thing with the sync track, and in the film I used actually just the track from the video. It was a 3/4 inch video, so we just used the 3/4 inch video track. We didn't go back to the PCM track.
Right.
But Steve made quarter track stereo dubs of that for Arthur. So then Arthur used that material in
for that release. Well, it's so awesome to catch up with you, Phill, and thank you so much for taking the time and sharing some memories about these things. And I'll send you.
Great. That was really great. It's great to talk to you.
Yeah, it's great to talk to you too. And I'll.
You were a great moderator, I think.
Oh, thanks.